We begin today the Gemara on the top of Chav Beis Amud Aleph, the first line where it says Ta Shema. So the Gemara, his ibaya here was, when a husband nullifies his wife's nedarim or his wife's nazirus, how does that work? Is he retroactively uprooting it, in the lashon of the Gemara mekar akar, or he's only cutting it from here forward? In the lashon of the Gemara megas gayas. Okay, so the Gemara here will bring, or try to bring another raya for this. Talk to Gemara, Tashema ha'isha shenadra ben Nazir. We had this already before. A woman that took upon herself naziris and then v'nitmis, she became tameh. And her husband nullified her naziris, so now she's not a nazir anymore. But nevertheless, she separated a carbon for her tumah, mivia chatas ha'oif. So there's three karbanis that are involved in this. There's a chatas, there's a oila, there's an asham, and two of them are birds. So the chatas ha'oif, that carbon she still has to bring, even though the husband nullified the naziris. Ve'ena mivia oila ha'oif. But the carbon oila that's brought from a bird, that she does not bring. Now, so what does this teach us? Does the husband nullify the nether retroactively, or does he cut it right only from now going forward? So the Gemara says, if you're going to say that the husband only cuts the naziris going forward, so that means she was a nazir before and she became tameh as a nazir. So if so, taisinami oila sa'if. Let her bring the chatos and the oila sa'if, and actually there's an asham as well. Let her bring everything because she was a nazir when she became tameh. Okay, so the Gemara asks an obvious question in the reverse. So ve'elamai. So what are you going to say? From here we can see mekar akar, that the husband nullifies and uproots the naziris from the beginning, and therefore she doesn't bring the oila sa'if because she never was a nazir. If so, chata sa'if nami le'taisi. So on the other hand, why is she bringing the chata sa'if? So either way you learn this braisa, it's difficult to understand why are we distinguishing between the oila and the chatas. So the Gemara answers that hachanami, you're right. The emissaries, we have to say that the husband uproots the naziris from the beginning. So therefore the truth should be that she should not bring the chatas, just like you don't bring the oila. But v'hamani, the Gemara already explained this before when it quoted this braisa. Who is this braisa going according to? Rabbi Lazar Kapari. It goes according to Rabbi Lazar Kapar. What did he say? The Tanya, Rabbi Lazar Kapar, and some Agoris Barebi Oimer. Ma tamad loima. What do I learn out regarding this nazir that brings his carbon when he was tamei ma'asher chata ala nefesh, that he's bringing a carbon chatas for the sin that he sinned on a soul? Nefesh chatazeh. What soul did this person sin for? Ella, what this means is because he causing himself pain by taking upon himself naziris not to drink wine. Nikra chayte. This itself is the reason why he's called a sinner. And then Rabbi Lazar Kapar added, from this we could learn out a kal v'chaymer. This individual only took upon himself naziris to hold himself back from drinking wine. Nikra chayte. He's a sinner. A person that will be mitzayed himself from anything. In other words, a person that takes upon himself to fast. Most definitely he's considered to be a sinner. So what's the pshat in the Gemara's answer? The Gemara is saying, really, the only way to understand this braisa is to say that the father, or the husband rather, uprooted the neder from the beginning. So why is she still bringing a carbon chatas? She's bringing a carbon chatas as a kapara for the very fact that she accepted upon herself this naziris, and for that time period, she's mitzayed himself from the wine. And I already explained this when we learned the Gemara on Daf Yutes, when it was quoted the first time, that the Rishonim add to this that a carbon oila is a carbon that's only brought when there's a definite obligation to bring the carbon. Chatas, we find, could be brought even in a case of a suffix, by a yoldis, by a woman that gives birth, and it's not clear what carbon she has to bring. She brings a chatas. So here as well, even though now she wasn't an actual nazir, but for this itself that she was mitzayir herself, chatas is a kind of carbon that she will still bring. Okay, so it comes out from the Gemara saying here that the conclusion sort of is that the husband uproots the neder from the beginning. It's the only way to understand this braisa. But now the Gemara says there's a raya from another braisa that clearly says that the husband does not uproot the neder from the beginning. He only cuts it from here going forward. Toshima, I'll bring you a raya. The Tanya behedye. We clearly learned in the braisa about this. The braisa says, "Isha shenadra ben Nazir." A woman accepts upon himself to be a nazir. Her friend heard this. And she says, I will also be a nazir. Now the husband of the first woman came along and nullified the naziris for the first one. So he muteres. So the first one is going to be muter. But her friend is still going to be yaser. So what do you see from this? Shema mina, from this it's clear, Baal Meges Gayis, that the husband only cuts the Naziris and does not uproot it completely. If the husband would uproot it from the beginning, Meikare, Mafreya, so then even the second one should also not be a Nazir anymore, because the second one is only a Nazir like the first, dependent on the first. Elamai, you have to say that the first one, Naziris, gets uprooted from here going forward, but she was a Nazir before. So the second one that says Va'ani still remains a Nazir like the first one, because then when she said Va'ani, the first one was a Nazir. So we have a clear ayah from here. So the Rosh discusses over here that it seems to be sort of a contradiction, because from the previous Braise, the Gemara explained, the only way to explain the Braise before is if you say that the husband uproots the Naziris from the beginning, and that's why she does not have to bring the Eilas Ha'oif when she became Tameh. And here in this Braise, we're proving Baal Megas Gayis, that the husband only uproots the Naziris going forward. So one Pshat, the Rosh says that it's Taka Machlekes, these two Braises. Another Pshat, the Rosh says that even if it's true that the Baal only uproots the Naziris, again, even if the Baal only cuts the Naziris from here going forward, nevertheless, she does not have to bring the carbon Eilas Ha'oif. And the reason is, when a Nazir becomes Tameh, and he brings Karbanis, in order to continue his Naziris, the only time when you're obligated to bring Karbanis is because when you're done with these Karbanis, you're going to start your Naziris over again, Betara. But in this case, since the husband cut the Naziris, even though he only cut it from now going forward, but now it's cut, she doesn't have to start the Naziris over again. In such a case, there's no obligation to bring Karbanis Naziris for that. So therefore, we could say that the previous Braise agrees Baal Megas Gayis. Okay, now the Gemara brings the continuation of this Braise that it just quoted. Rab Shimon says, Im Amrullah, if when one woman heard her friend saying she's going to be a Nazir. Now the friend said, Hareini kamaisech, I'm going to be like you. And instead of saying ani, me too, she said stronger words. Hareini kamaisech. Then what happens is Stein Mutarais. If the first one, her husband, nullified her Nazirus, her friend will also be mutter. When you say Va'ani, Va'ani means I'm going to be like you the way you are now. I'm going to be a Nazir. But if she says I'm going to be exactly like you, so then she intends to say I'm going to be like you the way you're now and the way whatever's going to happen later. If your husband's going to nullify your neder, so then my Nazir should also be nullified. So now this next piece of the Gemara goes back actually to the first case of the Braise. What did it say in the first case of the Braise again? When you have one woman that accepted upon herself Naziros, and then a friend says, Va'ani, even if the husband nullified the Naziris of the first woman, the second woman remains a Nazir. Because she said she'll be a Nazir like this woman was in the beginning, even though now her Naziris is nullified. This, the Gemara learns out to resolve an Ibaya that was asked regarding the Darim Bechlal. So Mazutre Bereid Rav Mari Yama. Mazutre, the son of Rav Mari, said as follows. Hi, this halacha, the first halacha we learned here in this Braise, Hainu the Rami Bar Chama. This seems to be this will resolve the shaila that Rami Bar Chama asked regarding the Darim Bechlal. The boy Rami Bar Chama asked the shaila. If a person says Harei Alai Kibisar Zevach Shlomim, he has a piece of meat sitting on the table, and then there's another piece of meat that's from a carbon Shlomim. And he says that this piece of meat should be like this piece of shlamim. If you remember, we learned in the Masechta Nedarim, that's one of the ways to make a neder. It's called hatfasa. When you associate this meat with something else, or maybe it's even more than that, you're sort of bringing over the kedusha of this meat onto this other piece of meat here, and it becomes asur with a neder. Right? So he said that it should be like the basar of zevach shlamim. So mahu, what's the halacha? Does this neder take effect or not? What's the Gemara Shaila? Why should it not take effect? Basa Shlamim is Aser, it's Kachim, and I'm saying that this piece of meat should be like this piece of Kachim, so it should become Aser, like this piece of Kachim. So the Gemara now explains, Shlamim is meat that before you spray the blood on the Mizbeach, the Basa Shlamim is Aser for anybody to eat. But once you spray the blood on the Mizbeach, the Basa Shlamim becomes mutter to eat. By the Kayanim, or even by the Bailim, they can eat from it. So now the question is, when he says that this piece of meat should be like this Basa Shlamim, what does he mean to say? Does he mean to say like what it is now? And here, the Gemara is talking about that this piece of Basar Shlamim, was the blood was not yet spread in the Mizbeach. So presently, this piece of Basar Shlamim is Aser. Or do we say that because it's going to become mutter later, when you spray the blood on the Mizbeach, so then it's going to be mutter. So saying that it's going to be like this piece of Shlamim, the person is thinking about what it's going to be later, and later it's going to be mutter. Let's see in the words of the Gemara. So, Mahu, what's the halach here? Do I say, Ki mitves inish beikara matves. When the person is associating or he's connecting this piece of meat that he has on the table to the basa shlamim, he's connecting it to the piece of basa shlamim like it is in the beginning, which is the way it is now. Before the blood was spread in the mizbeach and it's asa to eat. So therefore your neder will take effect. Or perhaps the word bitsanana literally means when it cools off. So regarding this situation, what it means is when the isser of the basa shlamim is removed because he sprayed the blood on the mizbech, so now that isser, so to speak, cooled off, that's what the person was saying, and therefore, since it's going to become mutter soon, so therefore when he says that this piece of basa should be like this piece of basa, he's thinking about this piece of basa the way it's going to be later. And later it's going to be mutter. And therefore, the neder does not take effect. There's no issa here later. Okay, so now the Gemara is saying that this shaila that it's asking here could be resolved of the case that it spoke about in the Braisa. What's the connection to the case that it spoke about in the Braisa? When you have a woman that hears her friend saying that I'm going to be a Nazir, and she says, I'm going to be like my friend, the Gemara right now understands that it's similar to the case of this basa shlamim. Just like the basa shlamim, now it's aser, and soon it's going to become mutter when you spray the blood on the mizbeach. With a woman that accepts upon herself naziris, it's a similar thing. Now she accepts upon herself naziris, so now she's a nazir. But when the husband comes along and he has the option to annul this naziris, she'll not be a nazir anymore. So this other woman that's saying that I'm going to be like my friend that just accepted upon herself naziris also sees her friend, which is now a nazir, but soon may not be a nazir because she can't be a nazir on her own. It's dependent on her husband. And nevertheless, what do we say? That she becomes a nazir. When she says she's going to be like her friend, she becomes a nazir. So just like over here I say that even though she knows that her friend's naziris may be bottled later, nevertheless, she's saying that she should be a nazir like what her friend is presently. So too with the basar we say that even though the kedusha, the kachim of this basar will be bottled soon, because soon everybody will be able to eat it, the kayanim can eat it, the bailam can eat it, but nevertheless when you say that this piece of basar should be like the basar shlamim, you're saying that it should be like what this basar is presently, that now it's aser, and therefore the neder takes effect.
He wants it to be like later. What's he talking for? Later it's
okay. So the Gemara over here now is going to say taka svara to explain why it's taka not the same. Very good. Okay.
Well, I was thinking about that, but there is a chiluk because it only can be eaten for a certain amount of time.
Certain amount of time, certain people. Okay, let's see in the svara of the Gemara. But before we learn the Gemara weiter inside, let me just quickly mention one point. If you look at Amar Aleph, there's a very long taisvis. You ready to learn the whole taisvis? Okay, let me just tell you one point that Taisvis says over here regarding this. We had the same Gemara of this Ibaya of Rami Bar Chama and Masechta Nedarim Daf Yud Aleph. There, the Ibaya was brought differently than it's brought here. There, the Gemara brought this Ibaya when you have a piece of shlamim after the blood was sprayed in the Mizbeach. And now a person says that this piece of basa that I have is going to be like this piece of shlamim. And there, the way the Gemara presented the question was, do I say because this piece of basa was once asa before, so therefore he means to say that this piece of basa should be asa like it was before? Or do I say that he's saying that this piece of basa should be like this piece of basa the way it is presently, and presently it's mutter? In our Gemara, though, first Taisvis tries to reconcile our Gemara with the Gemara of Nedarim, but then Taisvis, the Rosh, they all say that the Gemara here is bringing the Ibaya different than it brought it in Nedarim. Here, the way the Ibaya is brought is that we're talking about the piece of basar, the way it's presently aser, before the blood was spread in the Mizbeach. And now the question is whether the person wants to compare and say it should be aser the way it is presently, and presently it is aser, or because it's going to become mutter later, so therefore it's not going to be a neder, because he's thinking that this piece of basa is not going to be asa forever, it's going to become mutter soon. Okay, that's the pshat here in the Gemara. Okay, but the Gemara now says you can't compare the case of the basar that will become mutter to the case of the woman that could also become mutter by her husband nullifying her naziris. Why? Midami, there's no comparison here. Hasam, by the case of the basar of the shlamim, kiv and damare, like psar zevach shlamim, since the person said that he wants this item to be like the basar of zevach shlamim, even though it's true, that after you spray the blood on the mizbeach, matzi achale b'chutz, so now you can eat it outside of the Beis HaMikdash, you can eat it in the entire Yerushalayim, but nevertheless, Mikdash Kaddish, Even in that time, the basar of zevach shlamim does not become chulin altogether. So it still has certain halachas that apply to kachim, where it's allowed to be eaten, when it's allowed to be eaten, who could eat it, and so on. So it still has certain kedusha in it. So therefore, what's the Gemara saying? The Gemara is saying that regarding the basar shlamim, you could understand why a person would make such a mistake. It's possible that the person was saying that he wants this item to be like what the basar shlamim is now, but it's also possible that he meant that it should be aser like the basar shlamim after the zrika, because he's thinking in his mind that even after the zrika it's still called kachim. But really he's making a mistake, because afterwards it's going to be mutter to eat. So therefore the neder can't take effect. So over there's a svara to say both ways, that with the way the person is thinking, it's possible he makes this mistake. But over here, when a woman hears her friend saying that she's going to be a Nazir, if you're saying that she's trying to say, she's thinking about the fact that after she'll be cooled off, meaning that her husband will be matter her Naziris, she won't be a Nazir anymore, that's what she's saying. I'm going to be like my friend after the husband took off the Naziris, the husband already completely nullified the Naziris. So what is she saying? I'm going to be like my friend after the husband took off the Naziris and then there's no Naziris left. So what she's saying is meaningless, it's pointless. So why is she saying this? Over here, it's more logical to say that she meant to say that she's going to be like her friend, which is a Nazir now. Okay, so therefore you can't compare the two. But the Gemara does conclude with another opinion that said, Ikke de Amri, there is another opinion that says that we don't look at this svara, that a person, dafke by shlamim, a person can make a mistake. But we say, Hainu de Rami Bachame vadai. This is definitely the same like the Shaila of Rami Bachame. These are both cases which is asa now, and is going to become mutta later, whether the basar, whether the isha, and in both cases we say the same point, that if a person says that I'm going to be like this basar, or I'm going to be like this isha, what he means to say is, in its present state, which it's asa now, even though later it's going to become mutter, and the neder takes effect, or the naziris takes effect, so we do compare them. Okay, the Gemara here brings now another halacha. Amr Allah, maybe this is a continuation of the previous brisa, I'm not sure, but this is another halacha when one woman compares herself to her friend. She heard her friend saying that she's going to be a Nazir, and now her friend comes along in Amr Allah and she says to her, Hareini Nazire be'ikvayach. I will be a Nazir going in your footsteps. So this is now a different expression. We had Vani, we had Kamaisech, I'll be like you, and now be'ikvayach, I'm going in your footsteps. This is, so now it's not clear what this lashon means. Mahu, what does this mean? Hareini be'ikvayach be'kula milsa, I'm following in your footsteps completely. Completely means all the way to the end. And Visharya, so therefore, if in the end the first Isha got a heta from her husband nullified her Naziris, so now her friend will also be mutter, because be'ikvayach means going in your footsteps till the end. She's saying, I'm going in your footsteps now. What you're saying in the beginning. Right now, you're asa before your husband is going to nullify your Naziris, va'asira. So therefore, I'll be asa. Even after the husband nullifies her Naziris, she's only following her footsteps in the beginning of the footsteps, but not in the end. That's the shaila. What does the word bikvayach mean? Somebody shainim here say that the Gemara suffix is actually also regarding the words bikvayach. Sometimes you find the word akev means like the heel, the footsteps, the end. And sometimes the word akev could be used for the beginning also, like akev ashasham avram b'koili. It doesn't mean necessarily the end. So therefore it's not clear what the word bikvayach means. Tashema, so the Gemara says we can bring an ayah from one of the cases that we learned before in the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that Isha Shanadra, woman accepted upon himself bin Nazir to be a Nazir. Now Vishama Baila, her husband heard about this. Va'amad, and what did the husband say? Va'ani, that I'm also going to be a Nazir like you. So the Mishnah says Eina Yachal Lahafer, that the husband cannot nullify this neder. Now the way the Gemara understands this is a woman saying to her friend that I'm following your footsteps is, and over here the husband saying Va'ani, that I'm going to be like you, is the same thing. Even though the husband did not say the term be'kvayach, but nevertheless, when a husband says to his wife that I'm going to be like you, the husband knows good and well that it's in his power to nullify his wife's naziris. So when he says va'ani, he's saying it with the full awareness of what his wife said now, that she's going to be a nazir, and also knowing the future that he could nullify the naziris. And he said va'ani. So therefore the Gemara compares these two cases. Now, the Gemara says, and comes to explain now, so what do we see from this Mishnah? Why, if the husband said, Va'ani, can't he nullify his wife's Naziris? If he says
Vani, that means that automatically he
was
was
Mekayim.
like her, doesn't want
okay, so at this point, actually, the Gemara understands that when he says Vani, it doesn't necessarily mean that he was Mekayim, his wife's Naziris. That the Gemara is going to. We already had this in the Gemara before, and the Gemara explained this already. But here, at this point, the Gemara does not understand this as a kiyum. The way the Gemara understands this is when the husband says Va'ani, so he said that he's going to be a Nazir. Could the husband nullify his own Naziris? No, he could nullify his wife's Naziris, but he can't nullify his own Naziris. Now, if by nullifying his wife's Naziris, that will automatically trigger a nullification of his own Naziris, then he can't nullify his wife's Naziris, because what's happening is he's automatically nullifying his own Naziris. But if by nullifying his wife's Naziris, his own Naziris does not get nullified, so then he could nullify his wife's Naziris, and his Naziris remains intact. That's the way the Gemara understands it now. Let's see in the words of the Gemara. Now if you're going to say that if a friend says to another woman that I'm going in your footsteps, all she's saying is that I'm going to be like your Naziris that you accepted upon yourself now. And then if your Naziris will be nullified later, that has nothing to do with me. So over here regarding the husband, we should apply the same concept. Leifer law. When the husband says that I'm like you, but let the husband nullify her Naziris, lididah for her Naziris, but v'loikim didei. But that doesn't affect him. His Naziris will still be in effect. His wife's Naziris will be nullified, but he accepted upon himself to be a Nazir like her the way she was in the beginning. But even if he nullifies his wife's Naziris, his Naziris now still remains in effect. So therefore, why can't the husband nullify his wife's Nazirus and it's not going to affect his own Nazirus? He can still be a Nazir. Elalav. So the only way to understand our Mishnah would be Shmamina. From here we should understand the Kula de Milsa Matvis. That when you have a friend that's saying that I'm going to go in your footsteps, what she means is not only for the beginning but also for the end. That if your Naziris gets nullified, my Naziris gets nullified. And therefore we apply that to the husband as well. So Vehilka Hu Deloi Matze Mefer. So therefore he can't nullify this Naziris. Because ha isha the amra hareni be'ekvayich, just like we say regarding a woman that says that I'm going to follow in your footsteps, what does that mean? That if your Naziris gets nullified, my Naziris also gets nullified. So hinami muteres. So this second woman will also become mutter. So same thing over here regarding the husband. We're going to say that if the husband nullifies his wife's Naziris, what he's really doing is he's nullifying his own Naziris. He can't nullify his own Naziris. That's why he can't. That would explain why, if the husband said Va'ani, he can't nullify his own Naziris. That's the way the Gemara understands right now the Pshat in the Mishnah. So therefore, we have a raya that the husband, when he nullifies his Naziris, he's dependent on his wife. It goes together, and the same thing with two women. When a second woman says Be'ekvayach, I'm following in your footsteps, it goes together. If the first woman's Naziris gets nullified, the second woman's Naziris gets nullified. So the Gemara answers that's not the pshat. The pshat is already like we already learned before. Loi, this is not what it means. La'olam be'ikare matfis. The husband, when he says va'ani, he means is going to be like his wife the way she is in the beginning, which is the fact that now she's a nazir. And if her naziris gets nullified, it doesn't mean that the husband's naziris gets nullified automatically. So then why can't he nullify her naziris and his naziris should stay in effect? It's a different reason. Here the reason is Kivin Damalavani. Once he said that I will be a Nazir like you, Ka'omer Kayim Lechi Dami. This itself means that he validated his wife's Naziris. He was Mekayim or Naziris. Once he's Mekayim or Naziris, he can't nullify it anymore. Now, only way he could nullify her Naziris is if he's going to request a heter for this that he validated his wife's Naziris, then Matzi Mefer. Then he could nullify his Naziris. But if not. Once you say Va'ani, that's considered a validation. Once you validate your wife's Naziris, you can't uproot it anymore. So therefore, there's no raya from here to this case of Areni Nazir Be'ekvayach. It's not, the point of here is not the fact that the husband's Naziris is connected to her. It's not that's not the point. The point of here is Va'ani is a validation. Once you validate it, you can't uproot the Naziris anymore. Okay, let's see one more piece over here till the Mishnah. It said in the Mishnah, Hareni Nazir. If a person says that I'm going to be a Nazir, and then what happened? Ve'at, he says to his wife, and you. And the way we learned it in the Mishnah is he's basically like asking his wife, would you be a Nazir as well? And V'amra Amen, she says Amen, she accepts to be a Nazir as well. Meifesh Shalah, he nullifies her Naziris, V'shaloi Kayim. But his Naziris remains in effect. his Naziris is not dependent on hers. So therefore he can nullify her Naziris, and his Naziris remains in effect. So the Gemara says, I'll ask you from a Braise where it says different. In this exact case, Hareini Nazir, person says, I'm going to be a Nazir. Ve'at, says to his wife, and you too. V'amra, and his wife agrees and says, Amen. So the Braise says, Shneim Asurim. They both will become Asur. Right, so over here, the Shneim Asurim means that if they both are Nazirim, until they both become Asur, and they're dependent on one another. If the wife is Asur, the husband is Asur. It goes together. Ve'im Lav. And if she does not accept the Naziris, so then Shneim Mutarim. If the wife is not going to be a Nazir, then the husband won't be a Nazir. Now, the Bryce is understanding this whole entire case completely differently. That these two Naziris of the husband and wife go together. Either they're both going to be Asir or they're both going to be Mutter. Because he depended his neder of being a Nazir in her. He said Ve'at, so it goes together. So this is a contradiction to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that he could nullify her Naziris, but he remains a Nazir. Rav Yehuda, so Rav Yehuda says, Tini, you have to add into the Braisa as well, Meifres Shalom v'Shaloi Kayam. That the Braisa Taka said Shneim Asurim. If she accepted the Naziris, they both become Asur. But then after that, the Braisa says that he could nullify her Naziris and he could still keep his Naziris, the same like it said in the Mishnah. That's Rav Yehuda's pshat. Abaya says, Afilateme kediktani Braisa. You could leave the Braisa as the Braisa is. You don't have to add anything in. The Braisa is saying something different than our Mishnah. It's a different case altogether. What's the difference? He said to her, first he said, I'm going to be a Nazir, and then he says to his wife, Va'at. He doesn't say to his wife, Va'at, as a question. He's asking her, would you be a Nazir? Va'at in the Braisa means, he's declaring as a statement, Va'at, I want you to be a Nazir as well. So what does that mean? The katali nidra benidra. He's saying my naziris will be dependent on you if you're going to accept naziris as well. If we'll do this together, I'll be a nazir, and if not, not. So that's what the Braisa was saying. If she accepts upon herself naziris, so then the condition of his own acceptance of naziris took effect. If not, not. So that's what the Braisa is speaking about. Masnisen, on the other hand, in the Mishnah, kagoin de amalo hareini nazir. He tells his wife, I'm going to be a Nazir, and va'at mai, he's proposing it to her as a question. What's with you? Would you join me to be a Nazir or not? So in such a case, if the wife answers Amen, so she accepts Naziris, he never said that his own Naziris is dependent, it's conditional on his wife. He was asking her as a question, and she accepted the Naziris separate from him. Therefore the Mishnah said, he can nullify her Naziris, and Vishalai Kayam, and his Naziris is separate, and his Naziris will remain in effect even after he nullified her Naziris. It's two separate cases.